permission to go and release confidential information without being afraid that they'll be subjected to criticism or complaints because they have. To come back to it, that's why I'm saying get your customers to designate a trusted contact person. And again, that's not necessarily an attorney for property, and I'll come back to it again. It's someone who the customer trusts and says, yeah, if you think I'm in trouble and might need help, you can call this person, and I am consenting to your releasing confidential information for the purpose of getting me some help if that's what you think you have to do. We're also seeing, the two bottom points actually bear emphasis, and this is something I hadn't really thought about before. When stuff does go wrong, it's almost impossible to get it into the courts. How many of you have been involved one way or another in a guardianship or a power of attorney or a wills battle? Yeah, a fair number, but they're just crazy expensive, and you can't move fast enough. So we all have to be thinking that we've got to make arrangements to protect ourselves, and we're going to have to help our clients and customers do stuff to protect themselves because the courts just aren't able to keep up. And we don't really have an adult protection agency in Ontario the way that they do many places in the United States. So we do have the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee. I have a great deal of respect for the work they do. They are under-resourced. They are very good at what they do. They struggle to keep up, but they simply do not have anywhere close to the resources that they would require if they were actually going to meet the demands and needs of an aging population. You can't rely on them helping you out when you're in a jam unless it's really a jam. And if you're going to call, get a bit of legal advice if you do feel you've got to call them, because they're going to ask questions and do a bit of triage before they'll conclude that they've got to step in and help you out, even with stuff that looks pretty ugly. I'm also seeing, and my colleagues who do regulatory work, both on the security and the insurance side, are seeing many more complaints and many more claims. And I am seeing many more files that start out as a complaint, and I look at the complaint that one of my colleagues does, and we say, this is just a precursor, the claim is coming, get ready for it. So, what does all this mean in practice? First of all, it's unavoidable. It's just inescapable. Just as much for me as it is for you. Because if we're not serving an older population, which is where wealth tends to cluster, we're not going to be in business. And because we are who we are, our clients and customers are going to tend to be in our own age bracket. So this is just inevitable. If anybody here is in auspice mode, come on up for air, please. There's absolutely no getting away from it unless you just want to close up and not do business. But there's lots of opportunities to do business, which is what I think. I know it's tough out there, but there's lots of people making a pretty good living doing what I do and doing what you do. So there's genuine opportunity that comes with the risk. Problem is the bad guys know it too. So we're seeing more targeted attacks on old people. Anybody know anybody or seen anybody who's victim of what's now been called the granny scam? It works like this. It's actually been written up in the paper. There was a story in the Toronto Star not too long ago. Older person gets a call from someone saying, "Grandpa, it's your beloved grandson, Ronnie. I was in Montreal with some friends, and the police pulled us over, and my friends had drugs in the car." Bursts into tears. "Grandpa, please don't tell my mom, but I need $10,000 right away." And Grandpa runs to the bank and sends the money. How they're getting the information, how they're getting the names of the grandkids, I don't know, but I'm seeing the scam repeatedly. People in the baking industry tell me that they've got older folks walking in to branches. Someone who's got $30,000 in savings all of a sudden wants to transfer $10,000 to buy Bitcoin. So it just absolutely, so the good folks are spotting it, but so are the bad. That's not bad news for one slide, don't you think? So what are we all going to do about it? So let's just spend a bit of time reviewing the basics. And still nowadays, when I talk about mental capacity or raise the topic, I get somebody every single time coming up to me kind of angrily afterwards saying, well, how am I supposed to know? I'm not a doctor. Please spare me a minute, okay? You're not supposed to be a doctor, and you don't always know. And remember talking earlier, dementia, delirium? Sometimes you're seeing somebody who really is no longer able to make decisions, and that's how it's going to be from now on in. And sometimes it is situational. Someone's been in a hospital, they've had bronchitis, or they need treatment for an infection, and they're going to be back giving you decisions. So the truth is, we don't always know. But we do always know when something is outside the norm. Every single one of us, we work with people, and we work with a lot of people, and we work in fairly constrained circumstances. So we get to know what the range of normal is amongst the general Canadian public. So the expectation is when something goes outside the norm, you spot it and you react to it. You don't pretend it's not happening. And spotting and reacting to it may be nothing more onerous. In fact, probably the majority of the time is nothing more onerous than calling someone's daughter, who they've given you permission to call, and saying, what's up with your dad? He's not himself. So to get more technical about it, mental capacity means the ability to understand information that's relevant to making a decision, or the ability to appreciate the reasonably foreseeable consequences of a decision. So it's understanding information and appreciating consequences. A failure on either branch of the test means the person's incapable. I emphasize, we don't make that call. We get doctors or psychologists or geriatricians to help us make that call, but we know when it may be there and we react to that. So the basic rule is everybody's presumed to be capable of managing her own property, and until you see something that would cause a reasonable person to think they may not be, and then you need to do something about it. Because we're so long-lived, this is the other thing that comes with accumulating practice. What I'm finding happens is we're so long-lived, and we really are well. So I've got lots of clients now in their 80s who are vigorous, active, mentally acute people, and they stay that way until they're not. And the funny part about that is because we're so well, we're so sharp for so long, when things turn, I'm finding they tend to turn quickly and acutely, and often without a whole lot of warning, which is why, and I know I'm going to be boring, but I'm going to keep saying it, get your customers to tell you who you can call if you hit that moment where you think something's not right and I need somebody to help me sort it out. Having someone to help you sort it out means you've just taken yourself out of a position where you're expected to or need to make a call that you're not comfortable and you're not trained to make. Now, I said earlier that one of the other things I'm finding that's surprising and that I hadn't predicted was I thought the big issue was going to be mental incapacity. It's traumatic, but it's not that difficult. We know what we're supposed to do. And a lot of the time, actually, people aren't, you know what you're seeing. And when you make the call, the answer will be, Dad has been diagnosed with vascular dementia, and we knew we were just going to reach the point where he'd no longer be able to make decisions. We're playing for time, but we're going to activate his power of attorney for property, and I'll get you a copy of it as soon as we got it from his lawyer. So it much of the time, it's traumatic, it's upsetting, it's unpleasant. You're forced to do things you don't like to do, but you know what you need to do, and the path forward is pretty clear, even if it's a bit difficult. The gray zone is where I'm seeing the real trouble. And to repeat the point, that's the person who's often been a really successful investor and who no longer is, but who doesn't know it. And part of the reason that happens is it's a function of cognitive decline. As we age, unless you work at it, start taking guitar and French lessons, folks, it becomes harder to learn. And we probably all find that. I know I find it. Right? Stuff that I would have taken in a jiffy at age 25 or 30, I now have to work a little bit harder. Don't you find it? When the new product comes out and you got to work out the details so you can sell it, it's a little more tedious and it takes a little bit longer and the details don't stick quite as easily as they once did. It happens to all of us. If you're actually working at it, you know it. That's the difference. So if you're actually working at it, you'll have some awareness that you're not taking new stuff in as quickly or as readily as you used to. If you're not living a life where you're engaged with other people and you're being challenged, you will pretty quickly start to believe that you're perfect. Because to you it seems that you know the answer to everything, and nobody's telling you or doing anything that causes you to think it may be wrong. That means we're going to be seeing more people in the gray zone. I certainly have them as clients. You know, the person who comes in and they're telling me what they need. You know, to the point where I want to say, well, why are you even talking to me? And that is much tougher to deal with. Because they are legally capable of making decisions. They're just not capable of making the good ones. And when the decisions go bad, because they can't really imagine that it was them who did it, they will blame you. It's just guaranteed. They will go from thinking people will go from thinking they're perfect to thinking you're not like that. That's how it works. There's two practical things that you can do about it. The first is you need to be in touch with and talking to your customers. And there's more emphasis nowadays. People expect it more anyhow, and they want it, but you've got to put more emphasis on making sure that you're actually talking to people, especially in an age where the temptation is to do that by email exclusively because it's easier. So if you're actually maintaining a trusted relationship with someone and they are accustomed to receiving advice from you, you're less likely to end up with the problem that I just described. And the other practical changes, 10 years ago, when my colleagues and I were helping someone who was faced with the person who knew everything and who was insisting on doing something disastrous. And the example I use nowadays comes more from the securities side, but everybody will get it. It's the 87-year-old who is reliant on his savings to fund his needs, who insists on putting 80% of them into cannabis stocks. And there's often somebody who rode something else at an earlier time to financial success and just doesn't get that pot stocks are not what energy stocks were in 1972. The advice 10 years ago would have been documented carefully. Not just in your head and not just in an email, but an actual letter to the customer saying, I told you not to commute your pension plan. I think it's a bad idea for you. I told you not to invest your entire lira in risky stocks or whatever it's going to be. And if you insist on doing it, then sign a letter back acknowledging that you've been told this and that I think you're just losing a lot of money. And we then say, okay, go ahead and do it.
Nowadays, the advice is just don't do it at all.